begin with a little prayer, and then I promise not to hold you to keep you too long, because the name of the Father, the Ghost of God, from Holy Ghost, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and kindle in the fire of thy love. Let us pray. God, it does instruct the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Ghost. God, by the gifts of the same Spirit, we may and we rejoice in his consolation through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom, Saint Joseph,
pray for us.
Saint Pius X.
Pray for us.
Father, and of the Son, and the Ghost. Amen. It's a pleasure to be here in Holy Island and to see a full chapel for Sunday Mass. Well done. Especially because we do get attached to our churches, do we not? So finding ourselves outside is a real sacrifice, but the building's not the most important. It's precisely our Catholic faith and trying to avoid the contamination of modernism. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. Three things, if I can, and it's just a few informal words, because when I hear the word conference, I panic. There are a few informal words, and then you can do with them entirely as you see fit. And then you're very welcome, of course, but nice to see you for refreshments and all that. So, the papal visit to Ireland, the Society's General Chapter, and why I'm hiding in France. In that order. So, there we go. Firstly, the papal visit to Ireland. Now, of course, normally, a papal visit is a very important, solemn, and happy occasion, obviously. We are attached, clearly, with all our hearts and souls and minds to eternal Rome and to the papacy. We are Catholic and Roman. And it's precisely because of our attachment to Rome, and therefore to all the popes, back to St. Peter, that we are in this extraordinary situation having to choose, so to speak, between the modern popes and their modern teaching, or all the popes and Catholic teaching. That's the dilemma in which we find ourselves, is it not? Which some of you have been in the combat for the faith from the early days, others have come more recently, and so on. So it's extraordinary that as Catholics we find ourselves having to side either with all the popes and all the councils and all the saints, or go along with the modern things, and so on. And of course, we remain attached to what the Church has always done. We are branded as being disobedient, heretical, excommunicated, dinosaurs, fossils, not to mention the bad things I'll say about us, but there's other bad things. So, normally papal visit should be something glorious for the Church, reassuring for the faithful, a happy event for a country, having Christ's vicar upon earth come to confirm his brethren in the faith, as our Lord said to St. Peter. Now, of course, today, alas, it's not a happy event, and I said it with a true pain in my heart, because Pope Francis precisely is continuing the destruction of the Church by his attachment to the errors of Vatican II. You know full well, my dear faithful, the fruits of the errors of Vatican II, and not least in our own country, just in recent times here in Ireland, Holy Island, where the faith was so strong before, now voting in all sorts of perverse things and things against basic sanctity of human life. These are the fruits of when the men of the Church introduce errors into the Church's teaching, the fruits become bad, you see. Had the bishops been strong in Ireland, and fearless, and Catholic in their teaching, surely things would have gone differently for the Church, for the faithful in Ireland, and these unborn souls who are now exposed to the terrors of abortion. And that's it, seems to be. So, can anybody think of one thing? This is a rhetorical question, otherwise I'll be bombarded with answers, I'm sure. any one thing which Pope Francis has done. So we say this once again, we respect papacy and the person and the office of the Pope, and we are appalled and saddened by the chains of error in which the Pope finds himself. So the one thing which, if you like, sums up Pope Francis's attachment to Vatican II and the errors is the fact that he canonized Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II, the great apostle of Vatican II, you see. Now, so that's one you could say very precisely, but there have been so many other things, but not least regarding the Church's moral teaching on marriage, on divorce, on contraception, on homosexual couples, and all these sorts of things, which we know all too well, because as soon as the Pope mentions these things, they are ostracized by the media, who applaud the Pope for his openness, his forward-thinking, his inclusiveness, and so on, and awful. What are the three main errors of Vatican II which the Pope canonized in the canonization of Pope John Paul II? Well, you know the errors of Vatican II. The three main ones are false ecumenism, religious liberty, collegiality. And I can certainly recommend to you a little pamphlet, which is always good to have upon your person, in your wallet or pocket or handbag or whatever, which we had made, we had printed many thousands of copies a few years ago. It's called The Time Bombs of Vatican II. And it was a conference given to some of the Americans about 25 years ago by Father Schmidberger. Very good, very staunch, very clear. When we had these, it's interesting, when we had these pamphlets printed, and I was in contact with the Angelus Press in the States, and of course all these emails under the subject heading, time bombs, time bombs, time bombs. You can imagine that rang all the alarm bells of the authorities, so much so everything was hacked into, and closed accounts were still kept going. Because we had to go to Heathrow to pick up 20,000 time bombs. It was exciting to say the least, because of course people thought we were talking about real bombs. Time bombs refers, of course, to the errors of Vatican II, which were included, sometimes quite cleverly, other times more overtly, which would explode afterwards, you see. And so with false ecumenism, Vatican II having said precisely, well, the Holy Ghost uses non-Catholic churches as means of salvation. The Catechism teaches us one true church, one means of salvation. The non-Catholic churches, so-called, and the false religions cannot be means of salvation. Of course, individuals in these false religions could be saved by the grace of God, by special graces, by fidelity to the natural law, by their invincible ignorance and all these things, but that not because of their false religion, but in spite of the false religion. That's Catholic teaching, it's nothing I'm inventing. So to say that the Holy Ghost uses non-Catholic churches as means of salvation is heretical, certainly close to heresy, if not heretical, and blasphemous. And that's one of the huge errors. And you see, of course, the fruits of this, because as that's the new teaching, then why convert people? If they can be saved in their own religions, and that's exactly what Pope Francis says. Conversion, he uses the word, help me out here, with the P, proselytizing, conversion. That shouldn't be done, it's something in the past, it's not fair, it's not good. People should be faithful to their own religious traditions. It doesn't mean tradition as we understand it, it means they're, whether it be Islamic or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever, extraordinary, but those are the actual fruits of Vatican II. And Pope Francis is very open and overt, and no doubt sincere about this. But sincerity does not make the truth any more than the majority makes the truth. The majority of people may vote for abortion, it doesn't make it good or lawful. It's clear, you see. Religious liberty, the big error, of course, of Vatican II, which you know full well, but revising these things is useful to remind us, well, what are the issues? Religious liberty is saying that, Vatican II is saying that other religions have the right to publicly practice their faith, their religion. Now, there's only one true God, only one true church, only one true religion, and only the truth has rights. Error has no rights. And so to say that Protestants or Muslims, whatever, have the same rights as the Church of our Blessed Lord is absolutely false. And so that's why in Catholic countries, in times of faith, before the Council and all this, especially when there was a concordat or there was a recognition by the state of the Church's place, being the true religion and so on, people in private, of course, could practice their false religions, because nobody can be forced to accept the truth, obviously, but they did not have the same rights publicly. And this just shows precisely the difference between truth and error, and this also so as to protect the faith of the faithful from the contagion of false religions. So in South America, the Pope's own continent, after Vatican II, in the name of religious liberty, these formerly Catholic countries, at least by numbers of population and teaching and so on, Protestant sects allowed to have the same rights as the Catholic Church. What happens? Tens of millions of Catholics leave the faith, leave the church, and become Protestants. You see, because they're led astray by the American dollars financing the Protestant sects with their appealing ways and simplistic arguments for the faith, and abusing the ignorance of the faithful, which hadn't been helped by neglecting catechetics. And so tens of millions of souls in peril of their salvation through to religious liberty, you see, and the collegiality, trying to democratize the church, so no longer precisely the power, the authority of the church invested in the Pope and the cardinals, the bishops and so on, to pass on the faith faithfully, to transmit the faith as it had been handed down to them, not to invent new teachings, new doctrines and so on. There's Vatican I, which precisely explains all this, the Council of Vatican I, about the Holy Ghost is not promised to the successor of Peter to innovate in the faith, but to faithfully transmit the faith received from the Apostle, our Lord and the Apostles. So we see today how precisely the confusion in the Church about what is Catholic teaching, what is not, what must be believed, and at the end it's the lowest common denominator which is very little. And you look at some of these statistics. I wish I had the figure with me, but don't. From some of these American survey houses, or pollsters, whatever they call themselves. The numbers of Catholics polled who think they can be good Catholic whilst not believing in Catholic teaching on the Mass, the real presence, Catholic moral teaching, and so on, is extraordinary. Over 50% of people can be good Catholics in disbelieving all sorts of things. You see, that's so these are the errors of this the democratization of the church, and no longer precisely authority. Teaching the faith is handed down by the church, the councils, the saints, and so on. And of course, Pope Francis at last embraces all these things and continues them all. And one big difference, of course, with Pope John Paul II is, as I've mentioned, the Pope calling into question the Church's moral teaching. And so on. Of course, once the Pope calls into question the Church's moral teaching, people say, oh well, if the Pope says this is possible sometimes or the other, we don't have to do this, well, it's up to the individual conscience about all sorts of things, well, who are we to argue type thing, you see? It's this cynicism introduced by these people, interviews and words and so on. And the Pope also, in his appointments, putting to one side the conservative bishops or cardinals in the place of modern thinking bishops and cardinals and so on. That's for sure. So these are the reasons why we are saddened by the Pope's visit to Ireland, and we cannot support it. Now, of course, it's delicate because there are people who are anti-Catholic for all sorts of reasons, materialistic, atheist, non-Catholic, and so on, and they also could be opposed to the Pope's visit, but for all the wrong reasons. So we don't want to, of course, give the impression that we side with these other people in Eric. That's not the case at all. It's just we are guarded about our enthusiasm for a papal visit, given what we've just been speaking about. Right? So I think it's important to remember. That was the first point. Second point, the general chapter. Obviously, for those of you who haven't followed the news, I'm sure most of you have. Every 12 years, the Society of St. Pius X, like other religious congregations, has a gathering of its major superiors to elect new superior general and assistants, and to make sure that the congregation is faithful to its religious rule or constitutions or statutes. So this chapter took place at Icone, Switzerland, for the Society of St. Pius X, which I belonged to until last year, and that would be my third point, for these very purposes. Now, the previous Superior General, Bishop Felley, and the two assistants, Father Pfluger and Father Nelly, were replaced. And many of us were very concerned about the then Superior General and his desire to place tradition in the hands of Pope Francis. You can understand why. I mean, because we are opposed to those errors which undermine the Catholic faith. We don't have a choice in this matter, precisely. We can't make up the faith as we go along. Now, until sometime in the year 2000 and beyond, the Society always said, repeating the wise words of Archbishop Lefebvre, we can't actually come to a deal with Rome until Rome, precisely, comes back to Catholic teaching. I mean, this is the modern errors. It's not through pride or obstinacy, it's just to be Catholic, we've got to accept the Catholic faith and reject and condemn error. That's what the Church has always done. And then about, certainly overtly, 2011, 12, question of, actually, no, we could come to a deal with Rome. But how? Because, and I asked this very question to Bishop Felley, myself, at the time Superior of Great Britain and so on. My Lord, how is it possible now to want to place tradition under modernist Rome? Because things in Rome are changing for the worse under Pope Benedict XVI. Some people hoped and thought, I think mistakenly, but anyway, that things were getting a bit better. The Pope Benedict XVI, after all, said the traditional Mass was not suppressed and lifted the so-called, valid, but so-called excommunications against the Society of Bishops and so on. There's a bit of a thawing, perhaps, of relations. Okay, so some people thought things were getting better, and the Pope's secretary was also behind the scenes, sort of saying one or two things. Oh yes, of course, the Pope really wants this and thinks the other. And so people got a bit excited about things changing for the better in Rome. Of course, that's what we hope and pray for. Of course, we have to be realistic at the same time. But with Pope Francis, things are becoming so obvious, even to non-Catholics, there are problems, and this Pope is departing from Catholic teaching tradition in so many ways. But to want to place tradition under modern Rome makes no sense, does it not? So I asked this question to Bishop Felley, who said, oh, it's all because things are changing in Rome, worse, and because, now listen carefully to this, because Pope Francis does not care for doctrine. That's true. Pope Francis does not care for doctrine. He's a man of liberty, of expression, of action, but Catholic doctrine, no. So, because Pope Francis does not care for doctrine, therefore, Bishop Felley told me in person on the telephone, there is an opening for us in Rome. Now, if Pope Francis is not clear for doctrine, which I believe is the case, alas, God forbid, but alas, then how can we make a doctrinal agreement with the modern authorities in Rome? You see, because the problems between traditional faithful Catholics and the modern church are doctrinal questions. That's where we'd always said, for these problems to be resolved, the doctrinal questions must be resolved. Is there one true church? Or, as Vatican II said, the Church of God subsists merely in the Catholic Church. It's the most dangerous single word in the whole council, subsisted. As Father Schmidberger says in his Time Bombs pamphlet, you happen to hand or get them. Meaning there can be the Church of God, true church, can therefore exist outside the Catholic Church. And so these are the issues. So that was already a huge problem with this new orientation in the society. And it came to a head in 2012, as you know full well, at the chapter when we all thought we were going to be faced with having to accept or reject and walk away a deal with the modern Roman authorities. Now, actually, Pope Benedict XVI saved the day when on the 30th of June, he wrote to Bishop Kelly saying, of course you want an agreement, but to have the agreement, you must accept Vatican II and the new Mass. The Bishop Kelly said, he read us the letter in the chapter, said, of course we can't do that, so we were reprieved, saved, to fight another day. That's why 2012 was a big sigh of relief, and perhaps, and I say this with hindsight, the superiors present were put off their guard, so relieved about not being a huge buster in the society and submitting the society to modern Rome, that we perhaps were not as courageous or clear as we should have been. And certainly the actual chapter declaration was feeble, to say the least, and imperfect. And that's come back to haunt us. You can imagine, of course, in the chapter these things are kept under oath. There were people in favour, people against, and votes and disputes and all sorts. But the actual resulting chapter declaration, which sums up, if you like, the spirit of the chapter, was weak. There's no doubt. So this year, the chapter elects a new Superior General, the Italian Father David Pagliani, 45 years old. His first assistant, Bishop de Galareta, Spanish Argentinian nationality, and second assistant, Father Bouchacor, until therefore the election, French District Superior. Now, Bishop Williamson, in his Alacen comments, and I don't read many things on the internet, to be honest, but it's one of the things I do read. Bishop Williamson, in his recent Alacen comments, said the following about the chapter. One good thing is that the old team has been replaced. Those and Bishop Feli, Father Fluger, Father Nelly, they're very much in favour of trying to do a deal with modern Rome. Fine. The weak thing about the chapter, two weak things to mention. One is the election to two newly invented posts of Bishop Feli and Father Schmidberger, both former superiors general. Now, our statutes talk about superior general, two we call general assistants, who with the general secretary and general bursar make up the, let's say, the ruling body, so to speak, governing body in the society, where all the important decisions are made. So it's an important thing. It's called the General Council. Now, the chapter, somehow, and I wasn't invited to it, I can't understand why, but I wasn't invited to it this year. The General Chapter made two new positions to have two extra councillors on the General Chapter, on the General Council, the governing body. And the two people elected, Bishop Feli and Father Schmidberger, both, once again, want to make a deal with modern Rome. So it's very worrying that, having had a change of guard, you now see some of the old guard coming back to be in a place of real power And of course what happens when you have a new young-ish Superior General of the Pagliani, a good man, a nice man, no doubt a holy priest, and so speaks all sorts of languages and somebody very pleasant. But what happens when you have these older statesmen on board? You're influenced by what they think and do and have done, even if you yourself have more solid ideas. Now, Father Pagliani in the past showed himself to be 2011 and 12 to be actually more in favour of a deal with Rome than we had ever imagined. So, people can change, we can all make mistakes. First to admit that, of course, but it doesn't bode well. Also, that his name had been bandied about before the chapter, almost in an orchestrated way. And of course, Menzingen and Martin Rome are very clever about managing things, sorting out things, foreseeing things, trying to say, okay, well, if this happens, then the other, who do we want, and all the rest of it, and all the rest of it. So that's one of the negative sides of the chapter. The other negative side is the declaration of the chapter was also one which speaks about Christ the King and accepting anything Catholic coming from Rome and wanting people to work with us. It doesn't go very far. And if you see, you all know, no doubt, or know of, Archbishop Lefebvre's declaration in 1974, 21st of November. If not, check it out, as the Americans say. And which precisely talks about our attachment to eternal Rome, but our rejection of modern Rome. And the lines taken from the 1974 declaration and included in the General Chapter's declaration of this year, a few lines. What's telling are all the lines omitted. So all the strong, clear, forceful, but respectful points made by the Archbishop Lefebvre's declaration have been omitted, pretty much, in the Society's new declaration. So by omission, the declaration is weak. And if you see what's been missed out on the internet, you'll see the actual two texts compared. It's very telling. It's a bit like, don't get me wrong here, but it's a bit like in the new Mass. In the new Mass, the problems in the new Mass are mostly in the omissions, things left out. For example, the offertory prayers. Offertory prayers, traditionally, manifest, express Catholic teaching that the Mass is a sacrifice, unbloody sacrifice of Calvary, the sacrifice of Calvary, renewed in time by the ministry of the priest in an unbloody manner. And of course, those prayers were taken out and replaced with Jewish table blessing, prayer before, what's the expression? Prayers for the table, for blessing food and so on. And the new Mass is characterized by what is not present but should be present. And you could say therefore the declaration of the chapter is a bit characterized by what is not present but should be present, you see. Because the chapter would be the perfect opportunity for the major superiors, some 40 priests and so on, to say, oh, we've gone too far. We've perhaps been too influenced by modern Rome. Be very nice and very understanding and very, oh yes, we like you, and come to us, there'll be a place for you in the basement, but come along and we'll be happy and all this. It would say, okay, well, maybe our contact with Rome went a bit too far, we're a bit too contaminated, influenced by their friendliness, but friendliness does not make Catholic truth. And therefore, yes, in the cold light of the day, perhaps we should come back to more solid principles, which you are faithful, as I know of, the combat in the Archbishop's days and so on, and we'll express this, and we will find in there unity, peace, solidity, and will reconfirm the combat for the faith, which now is being shattered in so many ways and splintered. But the chapter didn't choose to do that. Bishop Williamson concludes his letter by saying there we need to pray very much for Father Pagliani. It's true, because the grace is still there. Prayers are powerful, and so on. but things do not bode well. And because the chapter did not, for example, third point of my little exposé here, did not come back on the marriage questions of 2017. Now, why am I exiled in France, in lovely France, in the Beaujolais? Beaujolais is a wine-producing region. So I'm living in a little caravan surrounded by vines. It's all quite picturesque. Can't complain, etc. I mean, quite simply, not far from the traditional Franciscan Capucin fathers. Just because I happen to have family in the area, and therefore, practically, it was a place to be. But why France? Well, last year, as you know full well, I'll just go through the major points. March last year, Rome wrote a letter, which was published in the beginning of April, saying, in order to help the society and to, in some ways, take away the problems connected to their marriages, I paraphrase here, two things. The first thing is this: it's the principle of the Roman letter, which is being downplayed big time by the society. The diocesan bishop, the modern bishop, have the right to come to the society churches in person or through a delegate to perform our weddings, but using the traditional rites. You see the problem? You've got a modernist coming in to abandon tradition, to do a marriage and so on, and with everything that represents, placing these marriages under the modern church and the modern legislation. Well, the modern legislation, for example, inverts the ends of marriage. Traditional ends of marriage, procreation, rearing of children, first. Secondly, mutual love of the spouses. Now they put mutual love first and procreation second. That has huge implications, as you can imagine. That's why modern Catholics say, oh, well, it doesn't matter about children because mutual love is the first end of marriage. You see the problem. That was the principle of this Roman letter. And the exception given in the Roman letter says, but in case of impossibility, meaning, I think, difficulty, the local bishop could, if he so chooses, delegate a society priest himself to perform his own marriage in his own church with what's called ordinary jurisdiction, as opposed to supplied or extraordinary jurisdiction. But that second, the exception, also has its problems because of submitting our marriages to the modern church, their modern tribunals, their modern code of canon law, and all the rest of it. So it's not without issue. So I stayed over a period of months to Menzingen, not least by the district father Couture, God love him, in Canada. This principle of the letter is not acceptable. It's a whole innovation. We've never done this before.